Brett, who knew us from our affiliation with Rogue River Fire, was a very wild young man I was familiar with and didn't really want a whole lot to do with at that time. But he tagged along and somehow decided, as Brett will, that he was going to be part of this. So he joined our little band and was actually one of the few experienced firefighters that we had that we brought on board. I do have to tell you that I'm one of the few that understands he's retiring from a position he doesn't deserve. He was never a chief officer. Within the first year or so of operation, sometime along around 1980, Brett had the assignment of being in charge of the equipment room. He was in charge of inventory and assigning PPE and so forth. And one day, Brett, as only Brett would, decided that he qualified as lieutenant and didn't really deserve to stay in engineering any longer. So he assigned himself a red helm that the fire chief we had at the time didn't notice, and Brett was lieutenant.
I was working across the street at Station 1 in the farm store, and I remember him coming over one day to say something or talk about something with them. And I got my first impression of this very confident, somewhat arrogant individual who kind of walked in and walked out, and I had to ask after he left, like, who is that?
Some might call it arrogant, but I never saw it as arrogant. What I always saw it is that it was a profound sense of knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. I've since learned over the years that a lot of that was probably BS because there was a lot of stuff that you don't usually know, or you may not have all the answers, but man, in that position, you had to demonstrate that.
I was in the car under a tarp with the patient, and both agencies, Valley Fire and Ivy Fire, were doing this extrication, and it was kind of at the time when they didn't play nice with each other. And so I'm talking with this patient, and out of the blue I hear, "Don't touch that!" And I peek my head out from under the covers, and Valley had this combi tool spreader at the time, and this guy's legs were wrapped up in the floor pan, and Brett was running the tools, and he had it set to where if you turn that handle wrong, it's cutting the guy's legs off because it's a combi tool cutter spreader. And one of the guys from IV jumped in there, and Brett jumped him. And then you see Brett and Chet Yancey nose to nose just yelling at each other. It was hilarious. That was my first time meeting Brett.
He'd apologized numerous times during firefights, like, hey man, I didn't mean to yell at you, so don't take it personal. And probably guys around here today have heard me say that before too. It's not anything personal, it's a passion for the job, I think. And so I'd say that he's had a lot of fireground influence as well.
He would show up on the scene and he'd start roaming around, and you'd start hearing the ops chief barking, and you knew there was a presence on the fire scene. And I think for a lot of us who have come up to become chief officers that worked in and around Brett understood that there was something pretty cool about that.
Brett has a certain personality. Some people work really well with it and some people don't. You just got to know where you stand. I mean, there's been many a times where him and I have not agreed and we were upset with each other, but we're friends, and that's always been important. I mean, I know when he was working with Phil, there's been many times him and Phil were at odds with each other, and they worked it out at the end. They've been friends for years. So that's just Brett. You have to understand Brett, and that's his personality. The good thing is you know where you stand with him.
He's been well known to be one of those chiefs you wanted to work with, not necessarily one you always got along with. And when I talk about my appreciation for his influence on the culture and the way we fight fire here in this department, it wasn't that it wasn't often contentious, but I believe that was both because we were extremely passionate, extremely young and ill-tempered also at the same time. A lot of our debates were loud, occasionally even moderately violent. However, that was usually reserved for furniture and walls and things, indoors and things like that.
Brett could build anything, and he was always innovative and always looking for something to do. We made everything from PVC fill pipes to draft site trailers, high volume pumps. Probably his most memorable is 7503, the old 7503. He'll know what that is. It was a real work of art.
Well, he's very innovative in ways to save money fiscally. So he's, you know, and again, that comes back to he's different. You know, he's paved his own path and created his own road, which is a good thing. You know, he's been successful in what he does. That's why he's good at what he does. If it wasn't for Brett having some ingenuity and being fiscally responsible with the community's money, they wouldn't have the things out here that we have.
But Brett and I, in many respects, are very, very different politically, ethically, all kinds of ways. Yet I've always been able to speak my mind to Brett.
Brett has really done a great job in getting us the equipment that we've got and the buildings that we've got. He's very good at dealing with the volunteers, and if he's got something going that he thinks the volunteers might be a little hesitant about, he'll work it around, and pretty quick the volunteers think it was their idea and think it's a great idea. In fact, one time he was getting us a fire truck, and the amount of money that he paid for it was, I says, so when are the cops gonna show up and repossess this fire truck? And then he laughed. But yes, he's done very good at spending the taxpayer money wisely and getting a lot for the money.
I've always said, that's a can-do guy. He's gonna make his decision, right, wrong, or indifferent. He's gonna live with those decisions. He's also willing to hear how the outcome comes, but he's gonna make his decision, and I admire that.
I'd say, well, certainly under Brett's leadership, we have had great support, and it shows with our levies that have passed. He really has been a great guide, or I guess you could say the hub of the wheel.
Oftentimes a fire chief is a figurehead or a political leader and spends a lot of time in the office and on the phone and in meetings. And Brett, by all means, does a lot of that stuff too. But he is the fire chief that you know, one day he may be in a meeting wearing a Class B uniform, and later that day he is on the end of the hose line fighting wildland fire or digging hand line. And so I think that makes Brett very unique. I was one of the few that there was never a time Brett yelled at me. I'm not sure why that's the case. Either I was too slick and got away with it, or it just never gave him opportunity to figure it out.
Most people don't realize it, but Brett invented the backdraft.
Don't buy no ugly green fire trucks.
So here's some Brettonisms, the top 5 Brettonisms that I will always cherish. And number 5, when it comes to doing things, there is only one way to do it, the Fillis way. Number 4, Brett is cheap, cheap, cheap. Never confuse his frugality with the fact that he is actually cheap. There is no such thing as a short conversation with Brett Fillis on the phone. They will go on forever and ever. Number 2, Brett is the poster child for human relations. And number 1, and this is probably the biggest truism that he taught me early on, is when you're looking for good people, don't ever, never hire a burger flipper.
Not that Brett's controlling or anything, but these are my notes that he approved for this discussion. All right, well, according to Brett, hope not, there is, and laws of supply and demand, Shermabago.
I'll tell you the biggest thing with Brett is learning to sleep in the same room with him, because that guy can snore. He sucks the paint right off the walls.
You could be in the middle of talking, he could be talking. Suddenly there'd be this really odd silence and pause while we may be looking at the television. And then you look over and he is just snoring away, just having one of those narcoleptic moments. You just sit there and wait till he's done, and then he'd snap out of it and start talking like as if he'd never missed a beat.
You know, it must have been the first week I was here, and somebody said, yeah, the fire was out near, I think it was out near Dog Fork. And I'm like, okay, where's Dog Fork? And Brett's response was, oh, it's out there where the chickens the turkeys. And it took me by surprise, the terminology, and it actually took me a couple seconds to figure out what that meant.
Pamela Anderson, weights and measures, full gallon nerve gas.
We have all seen this from Brett.
In fact, I've always said that when, if you put a lump of coal up Brett's ass in 2 weeks, it would be a diamond, just like the Ferris Bueller movie, but sometimes he needs to loosen up on that.
The saying was, if the dog hadn't stopped to take a shit, he would have caught the rabbit. I didn't understand what that meant, and it actually took me quite a bit longer to figure out what he meant.
The full contact basketball games we'd have, to the late night poker games where we'd all lose our butts because his uncanny sense of winning at poker.
Hall & Oates, Man Crush, Fireball Run, Statute of Limitations.
We got a call for a grass fire on Board Shanny Road, which happens to be near Brett's house. And for the life of me, all I can remember is Brett driving a little bit faster and staying on the air horn a lot more than he normally does. And I remember him yelling as he was driving the fire engine to the call saying, "Get the f*** out of the way, we're going to Brett's house."
It's generally polluted. What makes you think I said no?
In the early years, we had a pool table in the station. Now, this pool table was a dangerous thing. You have 16 flying objects. The last I knew, the cupboards were still in the station that had a dent in it. I believe it was the second door from the refrigerator on the left side. Had a big dent in it from a ball that went flying, and I'm positive that Brett threw that. Sometimes he had a little bit of a temper and things happened.
It's only a rash. Strike team of cowboys. Economist, paved roads, tectonic plates, University of Maryland, Reverend Baum, and Buster Heimowitz.
He could definitely give you the look, the Brett look, like, yeah, what the hell are you doing?
But I honestly thought he was crazy. And I think the reason I thought that is he was crazy. I have to admit, in the last 10 to 15 years, we don't really see each other that often, but it's one of those friendships where I don't think that's really mattered much. We went through so much together in terms of service delivery, in terms of growing up and learning how to do our jobs, in terms of putting our families together, that I believe it's one of those friendships that is plenty survivable, even without a whole lot of daily contact.
He's headed Mexico bound. How can you not enjoy that? And the one thing Brett has always done, and I've always admired, is that whatever he's doing, he is doing to the full extent. So there is no doubt he's going to enjoy that.
He loves fishing, getting away from there, relaxing. You can see it in him, especially the last several years, You could tell he was winding down his career, and when he started talking about retirement and setting a date and having that countdown clock, I think it's good for him. Hopefully, we wish him the best, and it's good for everybody to have those goals and dreams. He really enjoys it down there.
Well, I hear him talking about fishing in Mexico. But yeah, I mean, he talks about it. He also talks about wanting to keep his finger in the pie just a little bit. He really, really enjoys his service with the Orca team. Well, I think he's going to spend 50% of his time in Mexico fishing, and I think he's going to spend 50% of his time not leaving the life that he loved to a certain extent.
I think he's going to miss parts of it, yeah. I think he will, but he's going to stay involved in the wildland stuff. I believe he'll be up here every summer doing the wildland like he has for years, and he'll take the winters and go to Mexico and go fishing.
Ever since they started going to Mexico, much happier, much easier, and we're just happy. You got to look ahead. There's more than work. There is more than work in your life. I mean, he has given his heart and soul to this community, to this position. But we all know it's, for the health of somebody, you have to have a balance. And so that, I think, was missing. And so we're all really happy to see him accomplish that, and he and Connie just enjoy it so much.
Yeah, I envy Brett and Connie, and because they've been planning this for quite a while, and they share a dream of retiring in paradise in Baja, Mexico, and I can't imagine there being a better dream, really.
It's time to sit back and relax and enjoy it. Enjoy it now. I think he's still young enough to actually say that I didn't work myself till I died. I put in my time. I'm ready to start having fun.
I'd like to just summarize Brett as honest, loyal, dedicated, a hard worker, and a get-it-done guy. Congratulations on your retirement. I look forward to doing stuff with you in the future. And enjoy Mexico. Thank you for the memories.